Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Wednesday, March 23rd, and we've got some price action to talk about, some TA, also some headlines to hit today, so plenty to cover. But before we get started, CJ, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing well, Monty. Price is down a little bit, basically across the board here today on major global indices. Bitcoin, coming a little bit off 42, just barely above that level right now, but overall doing good and looking forward to getting into it because there's some interesting indicators and statistics that we have to discuss today that we don't normally bring up.
Yeah, absolutely, CJ. And I figure we can start there because you've been sharing some pretty interesting statistics this morning. One that you forwarded to me and some others was some research from Fundstrat, specifically regarding inflation data and also a potential leading indicator for some inflation data. You want to start with that?
Yeah, basically, I want to go over this tweet from Carl at Fundstrat, and this takes a look at the Cass Freight Index. So basically, if you've never heard of the Cass Freight Index before, basically it measures a lot of transportation volume and provides valuable insight into freight trends as they relate to other economic and supply chain indicators and the overall economy. And so overall, it takes about 1,200 divisions of more than 400 companies and manufacturers globally. So that's quite interesting. And basically, what Fundstrat has done is they've overlaid the freight index with inflation and have seen that it's somewhat been a leading indicator, specifically by 6 months, meaning that Fundstrat thinks CPI risks could roll to the downside in the second half of 2022. And hence, again, Fundstrat thinks inflation risks will break to the downside. And it's quite interesting here because you can see in the gray dotted line, that is the Cass Freight Index. You can see it's already basically reset to normal. Whereas, CPI year over year is still soaring upwards of 8 to 9%. However, when you see kind of in 2008, in 2010, when the money supply was quadrupled, we did have that as a leading indicator kind of coming down towards 2010. So it's interesting. Could be a leading indicator for inflation, but anything that Fundstrat puts out like that is typically pretty interesting. So thought it was worth a share this morning.
Yeah, absolutely worth a share, especially when you consider, how much emphasis Bitcoin traders place on inflation data. I mean, that before this, war between Russia and Ukraine was really kind of the driving factor in this market, whether or not the Fed would rate hikes in response to inflation. So thank you for taking a look at that. And, with that, let's just transition into Bitcoin here because, like you said, pulling back a little bit, but still above that critical 42K level. We talked yesterday about that massive purchase of Bitcoin from the Terra Foundation and Do Kwon and what that meant for price. And, obviously led to some very nice price action yesterday coming up to retest about 43.5. But as you can see here, the technicals are more or less being obeyed when it comes to Bitcoin. It's pretty interesting here how we're consolidating around this 20-period smooth moving average. And we have this, upward sloping trend line at the bottom and this downward sloping trend line at the top, acting as both, support and resistance. So, now that we're kind of getting this compression, CJ, one thing that you've talked a lot about is a, potential volatility squeeze. We really are starting to see signs of that here. This range is tightening, with the lows coming up here to about, 38.5 and the highs of this range being 43. The volatility is really tightening here. And what's going to be interesting, I think, for Bitcoin, if we continue to pull back today, is going to be the immediate critical nature of this 20-period smooth moving average. Because, since our, bottoming out here in January, we've had a few instances of crossing above the 20-period smooth moving average. And we talk about this moving average as a great indication of support and resistance during trending markets. But this is what you'll often see when markets are trying to make a bottom, is this indecision, this flattening out of the 20-period smooth moving average. That's what we're seeing right now. And the first catalyst in order for this thing to, climb higher and start turning up is a break out of this downward sloping trend channel that we have kind of emerging here. So for Bitcoin, I want to see us maintain this 20 periods moving average, perhaps like we did here. Even though we did see some profit taking at the top of the range, still acted as interim support, although we were, promptly rejected just a few days later. Still encouraging to see this level act as a critical level. I think we could see something similar here. So just something to keep an eye on for Bitcoin. And one other thing as well that I wanted to mention just quickly before I pass it back to CJ is ETH. Because ETH as well, although there are a lot of similarities, I think ETH has, a closer, more clear-cut breakout level to the upside. 3K has a level that we've been flirting with basically for a week now. We came up and tested it all the way back on the 18th. Today is the 23rd, and we're still sitting right at that level. So what that tells me is that although we're seeing profit taking, whether it be, traders just manually exiting a position or, automatic profit taking being triggered at this 3K level, we are seeing buyers step in to meet that sell pressure. So although often when you come up to these critical levels, like we saw at the beginning of the month, that sell pressure is sufficient to drive price back down below the moving average and to retest the lows of the range. That's not what we're seeing here. Although we're testing the top bound of resistance, buyers are still stepping in. And even with this sell pressure from the profit taking at the top of the range, we're maintaining this level. So what I want to see is a break above 3K for ETH. I think that a break above 3K would lead to a very prompt retest of the next critical level, which is about 3,200. And I definitely do think that part of this would be contingent on positive performance from Bitcoin. But still, we are sort of seeing somewhat of a discrepancy between Bitcoin and ETH in the sense that ETH has some immediate critical levels to the upside that I think we could trade as sort of breakout levels. So I'm going to be looking to buy, a breakout above 3K and just ride it, simply to the next critical level of 3,200. But ultimately, I think that, we are really, really close to kind of, breaking above 3K or ultimately being, rejected and coming back down and retesting this moving average. So just an interesting kind of discrepancy there in the critical levels between Bitcoin and ETH. But nonetheless, ETH is looking, relatively positive here as we enter the middle of the week. So that's what I'm seeing with the two major assets. But I'll pass it back to you, CJ.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Bitcoin and ETH hold up here, especially with the stock market going into support and seeing a little bit of rejection here, down about 1% today. So we'll see how that correlation kind of plays into price going into the end of the week. But I do want to share a piece of news here in the sunny state of Florida. And that has to do with the governor, DeSantis, basically saying, Florida should allow businesses to pay tax in crypto. We need to create the infrastructure to make this, doable and viable. And those who have known anything about Florida or Miami specifically, you guys will know that, Francis Suarez is very pro crypto. He's very famous for saying, he'd take his salary in Bitcoin when it comes to the crypto community. And so basically what the governor, Ron DeSantis, has said is, I've told the state agencies to figure out ways where if a business wants to pay tax in cryptocurrency to Florida, we should be willing to accept that. We're working through that. So very interesting to see, Bitcoin on its journey to becoming legal tender, not only in places like El Salvador, but also in developed nations and Florida right here as our home. And so I think Francis Suarez has done an amazing job over the past couple of years of creating Miami, or creating an environment for Miami to be a hub of innovation and entrepreneurship. So well done there, and good to see those positive developments.
Yeah, and it's funny, CJ. We were on a call yesterday with some experienced financial traders, and they were talking about Roman Abramovich and his all the things he's had to deal with in terms of selling his United States property. He has a lot of it, and one thing that one of the guys joked on our call is that one of the best use cases for the U.S. dollar is paying your taxes so you don't end up in prison. But now maybe you can do that with crypto. So carving out a new use case here, paying those taxes so you don't have the IRS knocking at your door. So interesting stuff there. Definitely a positive use case, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think that's all we got for today. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Today is Wednesday, so we'll be doing our member webinar at 11:30 Central. But yeah, any parting words here, CJ, as we wrap up today's episode?
I know we kept this one brief, just hitting a couple assets, but we're going to go in depth in terms of the equity market as well as some other various assets on the move. Namely, ADA has been an interesting mover in the last week, finally getting back above $1. But we're going to discuss that all and more in our members only Doge of the Day following after this. So if you'd like to get that or see access, just check out the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed this content today, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us quite a bit. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day in the world wherever you